Hello again. Um, welcome people. Hopefully, some people I've never met. Anyway, um, so I was looking at the 2023 Deferred paper, and difference equation question is a doozy, and there's loads of steps to it, and it's a pain. So I thought I'd have a look at this one and just talk through the steps and what I'm thinking when I'm doing it, so you can kind of stop and start at will and get some idea of, kind of, I suppose, where things are likely to go, where the complicated things that are likely to happen. And this has a whole bunch of things that are likely to happen. Um, so let's have a look. So it says in an economic model, blah blah blah, G equals P plus I plus S. Again, we don't care what the context is. We just have to G equals P plus I plus S, even though it is a lovely story. Well done, SEC. So P represents private spending, I is investment, and S is government spending. Cool. Um, I think there's a touch of anti-capitalist rebellion coming on here in a little bit, but I think. But anyway, so G can be modelled using a difference equation, where P and I change each year, and where S is assumed to be constant. So S is a constant. So what we're thinking there is that there's going to be some kind of inhomogeneous part. So that's going to not be fun. But we can't deal with that until we've got to the first few parts. So let's pretend that's not going to happen. Just nice to have it somewhere in our subconscious that we're going to have to deal with that. So anyway, in any year, P is proportional to the value of G. So Pn plus 1 equals AGN for n is greater than 0, n is Z. The usual housekeeping stuff. And then A, we have a value 4. Okay, 15/16. And then any year I is proportional to P. So it's between that year and the previous one. Okay, cool. Again, n is greater than 0 as an integer, and it gives a value for B. And then use this information to form a second order inhomogeneous difference equation for G. There's that inhomogeneous word again. So that inhomogeneous part is that S. Because S doesn't have to be 0, it can be an inhomogeneous. If S is 0, it is just homogeneous, but right, that's where the inhomogeneous comes. The second order, just in case you were not sure, the second order is due to the difference between the biggest n subscript and the smallest n subscript is 2. So the second order because we have an n plus 2 and an n there. For the constants C and D, which are yet to be determined, I'll leave that yellow there just so we remember. Calculate C and D. Okay, so from the information we have, we've got to somehow create that thing. So what I'm actually going to do, I think I'm going to type this stuff out. I'm going to have to shrink stuff in a second. I'm going to type this out just because it's going to get very messy if I don't. So I'm just going to reproduce the thing there, and that equals to S. So shrinking this guy down a bit. Bring it up there. Cool. And then we have our typing, and that's going to shrink it even more. So cool. So now we have this guy where we have to create this equation. So what I would be thinking first is, how do we start? Well, we have that Gn equals Pn plus In plus S from here. So we start with Gn plus Pn plus In equals S. I think that's the correct thing. Yep, equals. Oh, equals. Okay, that's what we got. Gn equals Pn plus In plus S. So I'm not sure what we're going to do. And the first time I did out this question, I started with Gn and realized that I was going to have to end up with n plus 2. So I'm actually going to put Gn plus 2 equals, because it says in the question earlier, it says for every n. So we can say Gn plus 2 equals P n plus 2 plus I n plus 2 plus S. Because, and I'm going to scroll up in a second, because it says for any n. Oops. Don't do that. Math mode is sometimes annoying. There we go. So it says for any n. So I'm going to just scroll up so we can see. So G can be modeled using a difference equation where P and I change each year, n, where S is assumed to be constant. So that equation GPIS is true for every n. So I just stuck Gn plus 2 because that was the biggest one we had there. Now, if that's a mistake and we end up with an n plus 3 or an n plus 4, I just have to take the n's all down by 1 or 2 or whatever. But I'm hoping that that's our Gn plus 2 and that we're going to get the other bits from our P and our I. Again, pause this, write this stuff out, make sure you're happy, and then press play again or watch it again or comment on the video, and I will happily explain stuff in the comments or in a new video. So first things first, we want to get rid of this Pn plus 2. So looking at Pn plus 1 is Agn. Actually, I'll use the highlighter pen. So Pn plus 1 is Agn. And A is that. So I'm going to leave A as A just because I couldn't be bothered writing out 15/16 every time. So Pn plus 1 is Agn. Cool. So like the P is 1 more than the G is how I think of it. But we want Pn plus 2. So, P of n plus 2 is A by G, and then what's the subscript? So actually I'm going to so what we start with is that Pn plus 1 is Agn. That's what we started with, wasn't it? Yeah, cool. But we know we want n plus 2. So the n plus 2 is 1 more. So that n has to become 1 more. Okay. And then what's the I? Now I'm going to do both of these things together. What's our equation for I? Is n plus 1 equals b by n plus 1 I n plus 1 is b by Pn plus 1 minus Pn. So I'm just going to write that down just so I can work with it. Is P n plus 1 minus Pn. Okay. And again, we don't want n plus 1. Now I can change things here, but you don't have the page in front of you, so you probably don't need to write this step down, this line. But we want n plus 2, so we just increase our subscript by 1 each time. Plus 1. So what we've got there is we've got Gn plus 2 in terms of Pn plus 2 and In plus 2 and S, which doesn't change. We've figured out what Pn plus 2 and In plus 2 are. So now let's put them into the equation for G. So that's A, G, n plus 1. That's replacing the Pn plus 2. And then B by P n plus 2 minus P n plus 1. plus s, don't forget the plus s. I've just realized something from looking at the question. Yeah, this is a diversion or a sidetrack. If you look at what we started with, we had gn is pi and s. Now, the s is on the other side of the equal sign to our gn. So we have the gn on the left, we have the s on the right. I'm going to get back to the question, don't worry. But we have our n plus 2 here and our s there, which is accidentally exactly how we're going to create it here. We have our gn here. Now the pen has decided to stop working. No, it hasn't. The highlighter decided to stop working. So the gn is there, n plus 2 is there, and the s is there. So it's actually going to be in the correct form with those two things being on opposite sides of the equation. So that's pretty cool. So feels like we're on the right track. Right. So we're here. Now we know what Pn plus 2 is, don't we? We know Pn plus 2 is this thing here. So what we can do is actually, because I have the typing, I'm just going to do that. So we're going to replace the Pn plus 2, this guy, with a gn plus 1, because that's what we know it is from the equation. And I have a feeling we know what Pn plus 1 is from all the way back up there. Pn plus 1 is a gn, yes. Cool, so we can just, now again, I'm flying through this thing so you can get to the good bit, but stop it and go look back at the thing and see. Pn plus 1 is a gn. This does not look fun at all. But let's trust ourselves. Let's learn how to type again. Plus 2. So gn plus 2 equals a gn plus 1 plus abg n plus 1 minus abgn plus s. So I just multiplied out the brackets there. Now, wait, I think that's very close to what we want. We want our equation to have an n plus 2, an n plus 1, and an n and an s. Sorry, I'll just look at that again. So what we want is gn plus 2 plus something times gn plus 1 plus something times gn equals s. And that's, I think, what we have. We just need to kind of sort out the somethings and tidy it up a bit. So in terms of our n plus 1s, we have a by 1 plus b n plus 1 minus ab gn plus s. So it just groups the n plus 1s together, and from memory we want everything on the left and the s by itself on the right, so I'm going to do that, and I'm going to be lazy about it. So we want to move that over to there, becomes a minus, this becomes a plus, and that thing stays there. So that should be the thing. Now that looks like it's in the right form for what we wanted. What's the question asking us to calculate C and D? Oh, because it gave us A and B, didn't it? Yeah. A is 15/16. Just write it down. So we know that A equals 15/16. and b equals, is it 3 over 2? B was 3 over 5. B is 3 over 5. Again, go back up to the question or look at the text of the question from the paper itself, which you can get on examinations.ie. Or if you have subscriptions to some stuff, it's there too. So we know that and that. So what we wanted to find was what B and C were. So what's C? C is the thing in front of the n plus 1, and D is the thing in front of the n. Again, gn plus 1 gn, I'm just being shorthanded here. So this means that C equals minus A by 1 plus B, and D equals AB. So, okay, so actually we can just work those things out now. So that's minus 15/16 by 1 plus 3 over 5. And the calculator should tell us that that is something, is minus, I think it's minus 24 over 16, which is minus 3 over 2. Again, convince yourself of that, just calculate it out, and it is the correct answer. And then this one is 15/16 times 3 over 5, and that is 9 over 16. Okay, cool. So we have our two answers. Excellent. Now I went through that in many gory, horrible, detaily steps. The whole thing there is worth 10 marks. We'll have a look later at what you get the marks for, but I think the hard part is the 5 at the start, and the last 5 is the answer. So we should be looking at getting 7 or 8 out of 10 for that, even if you make some one horrendous mistake. So that's part 1. Find C and D. I'll just go back up to the question. Use this information for a second to calculate values for C and D. Okay. Okay, cool. So I'm just going to take this thing here because I know the next part is going to require this. So we found C and D, and again pause it and come back. Now this guy here, this is part 2. I'm just going to shrink that a lot so it fits. No, that's for the next part. Ignore that bit, we're going to see what that is, but that's when we have an inhomogeneous. So that's our equation there, and then we have C and D according to my solution, which I'm looking at the answers here as well, is correct. We have this guy, this yoke here, and go over here up to the top. And I suppose in the exam situation, it might be a good idea to write the full thing out in the previous questions box so you have enough room. I'm just going to do a bit of shorthand here. So we have that and that. Cool. So what that tells us is that it's minus 3 over 2, that, and plus 9 over 16th. That. Okay, cool. And I'm going to, sorry about that. Cool. Now, so here's where we're at, because we know what C and D are. So second order homogeneous difference equation, and it says solve this difference equation. So we need to turn this in. Now, there's lots of different ways and perspectives and kind of techniques for doing this stuff online and ways of describing it. I use a particular one because it's what works for me, works for my students. I presume your teachers will show you other stuff. or slightly different ways, but they all have the same solution and they all get you the same place. So hopefully you'll spot the similarities and be able to cope with the differences. So we know this. So the question says, if this thing equals 0 and G0 equals 840 and G1 equals 820, solve this difference equation and then calculate G6. So, okay, so first thing we need to do is we need to turn this into algebra and get an answer or two answers. I think because we're a second order, we're going to have two answers. So what we do is we look for the thing that is the biggest n, and that's our gn plus 2. And what we do is we turn that into x squared. So the n plus 2 becomes x squared. Then we have minus 3 over 2, and that becomes, well, it becomes x1 technically, but because it's 1 power of x, but actually we're just going to write x and then this one has another one fewer, so it's 9/16 and no x's. Right, is that. And now suddenly we have a quadratic equation we need to solve. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply everything by 16 because I just don't like fractions. So 16x squared minus 24x plus 9 equals 0. And I think I'm going to use the formula for that because I can't immediately see what the answer is. So x is going to be equal to minus b, so minus 24, so 24, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 by a by c, all over 2a, which is 32. Could do that bit in my head. Oh, so why did that happen? Sorry. What's going on here? All over 32. There we go. Math mode's amazing, except when it isn't. So this means that x is 24 plus or minus the square root of minus 24 squared is 576 minus 4 by 16 by 9 is 576. Okay. So that means our x, the determinant is 0. So that means our x is 24 over 32, which is 24 over 32 is, I think it's 3/4 offhand. 3/4, cool. Now, in a normal difference equation situation, when we have two answers, we'd be writing it down. We'd be writing, not Windows, that. We'd be writing Gn equals a by one of the roots to the power of n plus b by the other root to the power of n. Now, when the roots are the same, there's this question, what's the point in doing two things? But it is a second order equation and we do need two different things to work with. So how we work this, or how the mathematical solution is, and I'll just type it up in text here if it'll let me. If the roots are the same, we have a, sorry, I have to get this thing to not be annoying. We have a special case. If the roots are the same, we have a special case. And unfortunately, we have to remember what to do. It's not, it's not intuitive what we have to do. It's just, this is what we have to do, and it is what works. So instead of writing this where we have the same thing, we have to put an n alongside our b in our second part of our equation. now we can get about solving it. Now, if you forget that and we put our 840 in for this, we'll get a value. Then we put our 820 in for one and we get another value, and it'll break and it won't work. And it's not working because we're doing the wrong mathematical thing. So that should be a kick in the pants, I suppose, in the exam, that I've done something wrong. So here we are. So we do Bn. This enables us to have two solutions, and then we simultaneous equation for A and B. So what we know is that we know G0 is 840 and G1 is 820. So G of 0 is 840. Again, I'm speeding through this because I'm assuming you have the kind of exam from examinations.ie in front of you, and you can pause the video and go back up to make sure that you have some idea of what the hell I'm on about. So G0 is A by 3/4 to the power 0 is just A. And then B of 0, so A is just 3, A is just, so it's plus B by 0, plus, type correctly, B by 0, by 3/4 to the power 0, so that just makes it 0, which is exactly what I hope. So we have A is 840, okay, and then we're told G of 1 is 820. Feels weird. This is one where you have no intuition whatsoever about whether this is right or not. So we just have to trust ourselves and know that the process is what's going to get us the marks. We might lose a couple for a blunder or a slip somewhere, but of the 20 marks we're going to get, we'll make one blunder, so we'll get 17, no matter how god awful and mental the answer ends up being. So G of 1 is A by 3/4 to the power 1 plus B by 1, which is B by 3/4 to the power 1. Okay. So actually, I'll be a bit obvious. That first one there means that A equals 840. Cool. And now the second one gives us 820 equals 840 times 3/4 plus B times 3/4. So I use brackets and multiply back and forth. Apologies. So that means that this gives us 820 minus, what's 3/4 of 840? 840 by 3/4 is 630. And then that's equal to 3b over 4. So this means that we have 190 equals 3b over 4, which means 3b equals 760, which means b equals 760 over 3. I have no clue, no feeling for whether or not those two numbers are correct. All I can do is trust myself that I've done it right, or the vast majority right, and we'll just see what happens. So we just have to hope. One note is not letting me do this. Okay, cool. Well, okay, so that's that line. So what that means is then our GN equation, this guy here, our A becomes our 840, and B is 760 over 3. So I'm going to write 760 n over 3. So we then need to do is we need to find what G6 is. So G6, or as they say in the thing, G6, is 840 by 3/4 to the power 6 plus 760 by 6 by 3/4 to the power of 6. So this means that G6 equals 840 by, now what's 3/4 to the power 6? 3/4. And then that's to the power of 6 is 729/4096. And then 760 by 6 is plus 4560. 60. And again by 729/4096. Okay. And I don't, you guys probably are going to just do that in one go. I'm just so trained to do it step by step because of my lack of calculator. When I did junior cert, we got trained in all this stuff. So that is going to, the first bit is going to go to 149.502. When I write stuff down, I usually write to 3 decimal places. Then it's 4560 by 729/4096. And that goes to plus 811, which I've got it wrong. There's something gone wrong there. What have I done? 760 over, aha, I know what I've done wrong. I forgot the 3. This should have been 760/3, which would have been 4560/3. Okay, cool. You're not going to spot a mistake like that in the exam. So you just plow ahead and you get an answer, and there's no way you could possibly have known the answer you were going to get was wrong. So just move on, assume you get it right. If you've time at the end, you go back, but it is not something to worry about when you get an insane answer like this. So 760 by 6 is still 4560 divided by 3. Then multiply it by 729/4096, and that gets you 270.527, and then adding that to our 149.502 gives us 420.03, and then it says to the nearest billion. So the answer is G6 equals 420. Now, the mistake I made was when I went from here, when I went from here to here, I dropped that 3, which meant it wasn't there. And I'm looking at the marking scheme for the answer here, or looking at the answer. So I know what I should have got, and I spotted a mistake. You're not going to know that in the exam. So even 420, 270.527 doesn't have, I have no idea why that would be right or not. So just trust yourself and move on. That's all I can say. So where are we? Is that G6? Now, again, you'll do this quickly, much more quickly than I'm doing it here, because you won't have to explain it or do it neatly. You'll just get the answer and you have a method. Now, that is the homogeneous form, the simple version. Now, there's loads of steps there. The marking scheme has like 3 lines in it, but we'll look at the mark, or I'll show you where the marks are got. But I didn't do anything here that was more than would be required for the answer, apart from going in detail line by line and then explaining it to you guys. So that's what's taking the time. Now, this got this little thing here, that little box, which we're going to have to remember. So I'm just going to put this up here. So assuming the government spends 40 billion a year, okay, 40 billion euros each year, S equals 40, can be expressed in the inhomogeneous difference equation. Solve this difference equation to find G in terms of N. So it's the same starting off point, except instead of equaling 0 in part 2, it's equaling 40, which makes it inhomogeneous. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take everything I typed up there, just because that's the same starting point. So here's where we're at. So instead of 0, it is 40. Okay. Now, the good thing is that with the inhomogeneous part, we solve it we start the solution the exact same way. We still get our, basically what we did here was creating our quadratic, finding solutions, and getting our kind of general form, which had the n in it because we had a repeating root. That's the same. So we can take everything we've done there. We don't have to do it again. We can just, if you want to, you can say from part 2, or you can just write it down. I think the assumption is that you know what you're doing at this stage. So this is where we're at. The only thing we don't do is we can't find out what A and B are, because that 40 here, the inhomogeneous part, is causing trouble. The 40 is the inhomogeneous part. So what we do is we have to write down what we call a particular solution, which is just a standard form for a solution of an inhomogeneous part. And this is a kind of what I would try, and I suppose what we do with these things is we guess what we think is going to work. And what should work here, and I'm hoping it works first time, if not, then we just try the next one. So I'm going to try a constant, because the inhomogeneous part is a constant. It's 40. So our particular solution should be a constant. So what I'm going to say is, and I'm going to just write Pn. So Pn, this is just what I write for particular solution. So Pn equals a constant k. You can do constant A, B, whatever, just whatever it works for you. So where k is a constant. So and I'll just write the particular solution. Now, if this doesn't work for whatever reason, then we can try the next one, the linear solution, and that should work. And if that doesn't, we try quadratic. But this, I'm pretty confident this one will work. But if it doesn't, we just have something else to do. So if it's a constant, that means instead of the g's anywhere, we can put k. And we just have to hope that that works. So what that would mean is that k minus 3 over 2 k plus 9 over 16 k equals 40. So that what that should do is k by 1 minus 3 over 2 plus 9 over 16 equals 40. I'll just calculate that because I cannot do that in my head. 1 minus 3 over 2 plus 9 over 16 is 1/16. So this would mean that k by 1/16 equals 40, which means that k equals 640. So our particular solution is 640. It has worked. What wouldn't work would be that if we had stuff with n in it, and we had n plus 2 equals n plus 4 for all n, which can't work. So there'd be an algebraic contradiction. So in this case, we've got no contradiction, therefore we have to assume it works. So no algebraic contradiction, which could be like 2n. So for example, it could, e.g., it could be 2n equals n, which can't happen for all n, because like if n's 1, then 2 equals 1, and that doesn't work. So no algebraic contradiction, so we are happy. Well, happy is very much the wrong word. We are accepting that this is probably the correct answer. So what happens now is what we write down for our thing. If we write this thing down, the function part that we worked in the homogeneous version, and then plus 640 is our inhomogeneous solution. So it's just a particular solution plus the homogeneous solution is our new answer, and from here now we can work out what, or we get to work out what A and B are. And just to remind us that G0 is that and G1 is that, so I'll just put that there. So fingers crossed here. Again, if in the exam situation you have no way of being happy that you're on the right track. You just have to assume it's correct and that you've done everything right. Trust your past self, and then at the end of it, if you have time, go back and realize your past self has been an incompetent buffoon and tidy whatever up. So G of 0 is 840, which means that it's A by 1, because it's 3/4 to the power 0, plus B by 0, plus 640, and here's the big change now. We have that 640 in. So what this means then is that 840 minus 640 is 200, and that equals our A. So we have a very different answer for A. The last time was A was 840, this time A is 200. Then we do the same thing for G of 1 is 820. And that equals our 200 plus 200 by 3/4, sorry, because it's to the power 1, plus B by 1 by 3/4 plus 640. And again, this is going to give us some very different stuff here. So what I'm going to do is multiply everything by 4. So 280 equals 600 plus 3b plus what's 640 by 4 is 2560. Should have got that from the 64 by 4. Anyway, so this gives 3280 minus 2560 is 720 minus another 600. Wait a minute, I'm going to do that. So 3280 equals 3160 plus 3b. So 3280 minus 3160 is 120. 20 equals 3b, which means that b equals 40, which is a whole number, which is confidence boosting. Doesn't have to be, but you know, because the previous one definitely wasn't. So our new equation then becomes, we now know what A is, we know what B is, we found a particular solution. There's so many steps to this thing. So A is 200, B is 40, and that is our general solution to our inhomogeneous equation. And now we want to find G6. So again, calculate G6. So find an expression for Gn in terms of n, which we've just done. Then we want to find G6. So G6 is 200 by 3/4 to the power 6, which we've done already, plus 40 by 6, 3/4 to the power 6 plus 640. So that's G6 equals, just to be sure, so 3/4 is that to the power of 6, was it? So it's 200 by our 729 over 4096 plus 240 by our 729 over 4096 plus our 640. So I'm just going to 200 by 729 over 4096 is 35.596. 240 by 729 over 4096 is 42.715, and then plus 640. So just adding those things up, 40 plus 35.596 is 718.3 equals 718. And just 718, don't put the full stop because people might think that. And that is that question 3 done as best we can. So what we'll do now is, again, pause it, go back and just follow along as slowly as you wish. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to zoom out to see the immense amount of stuff we've done. Again, this is probably way more steps than you need for doing it in the exam. I just want, just so you can see where everything comes from. So we're going to look, I'm going to point out in the marking scheme where you get the marks. So this 3-part 1, this thing here was worth 10. And the whole question 3 was worth 50. So this is worth 20%. So this is, so worth 10. So where do you get the points? So what you get 5 marks. Disappointing. You get 5 marks for getting to here. So 5 marks for getting to there. It seems like a lot of work, and it is, but actually it works quite well, because what happens now is if you get 5 marks for there, and if you've made a mistake, that's fine. You get 5 marks for getting these 2 correct. So no matter what you get for your equation, your GN equation, if you make mistakes, the worst thing you do, you get 2 out of 5, and then you get perfect 5 for finding C and D, because it has to be based on your previous answers. So the marking scheme was quite nice in that way there, that if you try the process but you make a bulge of the algebra, you'll still get 7 out of 10, which is reasonable for a question you made a mistake on. So that was worth 10 marks. So 5 for the n plus 2 bit, and then 5 for both of these correct. So now we go back up to here for this thing here was worth 20 in total. Let's pop it down there. So what did the marking scheme say for this one? So there's 20 marks. So the characteristic equation, which is this guy, so you got 5 marks for getting the 2 solutions. So 5 marks for that. And then you got 5 marks for writing this down, which is lovely. Then you got 5 marks for getting both of these correct. Okay. And then you got 5 marks for the answer here. So there's plenty of easy marks afoot. Oh, remember, it was 5 marks, so I'm going to delete this because it wasn't 5 marks for the wrong one. It was 5 marks for this one. So I'm just going to put an X here. Say wrong, just in case it's not obvious. So you got 5 marks for doing your factorizing, like doing a quadratic. That's cool. 5 marks for writing down the special case, which is probably worth the 5 marks. Then 5 marks for getting your answers. And then 5 marks for getting your G6 is 420. And again, the marking scheme is nice that if you make a mistake somewhere earlier, if you factorize it wrong, you'll still get an A and a B. You'll still get a thing. You might get them wrong, but at least you'll get full marks for the second, third, and fourth part of that. So again, 17 out of 20, even though you get it completely wrong, which is pretty cool. They want people to do well at this thing, so if you can show them that you can do something, you'll get loads. So now, this one here, where are we at? So knowing it has a particular solution of the correct form gets you 5 marks. Just writing down that it has a particular solution. Now the marking scheme here says it's A plus BN, but the thing in front of the N is going to disappear. So I'll just highlight that. It writes it down in that way to allow for the possibility of that happening, and then the N goes away, so it is just a constant. I was actually hoping that we were going to have to do a new one after a bad first guess, but it happened to work this time. So what I did there is perfect. If you don't get the answer, kind of a consistent algebraic answer, then try A plus BN, or then if that doesn't work, try the N squared. And there's one more special case. If we've a repeated root, what is this? If the constant has something to do with one of our answers, and well, there's one of the questions we have to do a special case where AN, KN to the power N, in that special case, but that's I'll find an example and throw it into the comments of one that works in that way. So where are we at? So okay. So getting K equals 640 got us 5 marks. And the weird thing is the marking scheme has a whole bunch of lines for that, even though it's very simple for what I've written down, but it's still 5 marks. So right now, without doing too much stuff, it's kind of the same as any difference equation you're going to have done. You've got 10 out of the 20, so you've already got 50, and we haven't done anything yet, really. Then the next 5 marks is got from, where are we at? The next 5 marks is got for getting our A and B in this case. So getting our 40 and our 200 is 5 marks. And then finally putting everything in here and getting this answer is 5 marks. So they really, really, really want you to do well in this thing. If you can show you understand the process and can get your 2 answers from your characteristic equation, the 3/4 we have there, if you know how to put that into a solution, a kind of general solution for the thing, then knowing how to deal with a particular solution, get loads of marks. And then suddenly that third 5 marks just appears because it's very simple algebra. Like it's junior cert level stuff. It's just knowing when to use it is the key. And then doing this thing here, which is again just putting numbers into powers and getting an answer, is another 5 marks. So this is a question where you can do really, really, really well by knowing just a little bit of basics and a willingness to power through. Again, how long has this been? It's been 54 minutes. It's a big question to explain. You would do it in less than half the time just by yourself, because you just write and don't have to pause and talk. Again, throw a question into the comment if you have anything about anything I've done, and I will get a response, and maybe another video if I've made a big boo-boo. Anyway, cool, hope this has been helpful.